All right. Good evening, Wyoming. Joseph Kibler here, your people's candidate for Wyoming Governor 2026. So glad to be here with you tonight. I'm really thrilled. I've got a ton of questions from the audience tonight to answer, about 20 questions or so. We'll go over those tonight. But first, let's start out. Let's kick it off with our campaign slogan, which is Give Freedom Back. You know, something we think about a lot about is we have all these freedoms, right? We think we have freedoms of property rights and taxes and things like this. But really, when it comes down to it, gun rights, healthcare, education, but when it comes down to it, so many of our freedoms are permission based. And that's why we're all about giving freedom back. Again, I'm Joseph Kibler, your 2026 people's candidate for Wyoming governor. So great to have you here today. And you know what? I actually am going to start with a question from the audience. I can see it right here in front of me from April. What are your plans to tackle various community concerns as it relates to the energy sectors, both preferred and non-preferred, entering Wyoming, like the nuke plant up in Kemmer? That's a great question. Thank you, April. I appreciate that. And the potential wind farm in Chugwater and in the on the Platte and Goshen line, rather, is what she said here. Sorry, the text is really small on my screen. So so to answer your multifaceted question, April, here's a couple of things. First of all, we are addicted to energy, right? And so when it comes to energy, we really have to be forward thinking about it. There is a give and take with every form of energy that we have. I love oil and coal and hydroelectric energy. I love energy that we've relied on for decades, and it's worked well for us. And I think, as Trump would say, bring back that clean coal and let's grow with that. I think that's a great thing, but I also think we have to look at forward ways to develop energy, April. And some of those things would include not wind farms. I'm going to get into that in a minute. I'm going to talk about Mark Gordon and Chuck Gray's little spat over wind farms here in just a little while. But let's talk about real tangible energy solutions that bring us into the future. No matter what we pick, whether it's nuclear power, hopefully someday we'll have fusion, and we'll have futuristic energy that is both clean, efficient, and safe, right? So it's some give and take when it comes to energy, April. What are we going to do with energy? The plant in Kimmer is going to get done, but then the question is, what do we do with the nuclear waste? And some people who are way smarter than I am, they actually talk about ways to reuse that nuclear waste so that there is no waste and create more energy. We're a little ways off from that. So maybe by the time the plant in Kimmer is online, maybe we actually have a national solution for the nuclear energy waste problem, because that is a real issue. And this is just not a Wyoming issue. This is a national issue. And the things that tie into that, wind farms. You know what? I'm going to skip down and talk real briefly because I have that in my questions here today. Kind of a hot topic right now here in Wyoming, you guys. Mark Gordon and Secretary of State Chuck Gray going at each other's throats in regards to wind farms. Well, I will tell you this. I would have sided, if I was governor right now today and I was on the Land Use Council and we were voting about more wind farms in Wyoming, I would have voted with Chuck Gray, and that would have been a hard no. You know what? This green energy, this is an utter boondoggle. It's not green. It never pays for itself. It's subsidized. We're sending the energy somewhere else and all this stuff. And then we have to pay, we in Wyoming have to pay the consequences for it. And whether it's our pastures or whether it's our mines getting filled with windmill blades. I was joking with someone the other day. We ought to fill those. We ought to ship all them old windmill blades down to California. Let them deal with it since it's their green energy problem. So I hope that kind of answers some of your questions on the energy issue, April. And I'm going to go ahead and go into Mike's question next. And by the way, tonight, you guys, this is an Ask Me Anything. So feel free to post your questions on social media, and I will do my best to answer those. Like I said, I've got about 20 questions here from other people that I'm going to go through, but then I will also try to get to your social media questions. This is all about me being raw, authentic with you, Wyoming, as your gubernatorial candidate for 2026. So really great to be here. My next question actually comes from Mike. Actually, he's our horse farrier. He was out here today, and he asked me, what do you think, Joseph, about property rights, taxes, things like that? First of all, super hard to unpack, like a lot of detail in all these questions tonight in this short 45 minutes to an hour. But let's talk about property rights. In our brains, we think that we own what's on top of our land. We own the dirt on our land, and we also own what's under our dirt in the land, but we don't. We all know that, right? We don't own what's under our dirt. And we quite frankly never own our property or our house because guess what? We're always paying rent and in the form of property taxes to the government. So, what do I think about property taxes? It's real simple. First of all, we just can't delete them overnight, but we need to make a plan to get rid of property taxes entirely. But that starts with this one simple thing. And by the way, I've been told we can't do this. There's no way we could do it. Oh, we will do it. We'll find a way to do it. We can get it done. And that is, we're going to go ahead and roll everybody back. Your taxes will be based on what you paid for your home. And if you haven't refinanced or anything like that, if you paid my friend that was talking today paid $93,000 for his property years and years and years ago. You know what? He's going to pay taxes on $93,000. That's it. End of story. Unless he refinances something like that, government will leave you alone. If you paid $1 million yesterday for your house, and you're going to pay property taxes on $1 million. But that's step one. Step two on property taxes is we need to eliminate property taxes. But we need to have a path for that, a path and a plan. See, so often our legislature and our government just loves to do things without a path and a plan. Hey, let's just take over all the federal land. But we don't actually have a plan for it, right? So when it comes to property taxes, let's actually have a plan to phase out property taxes. Let's replace it with some creative tax ideas. Maybe it's consumption-based taxes. Obviously, tourism, rare earth minerals in Wyoming, energy in Wyoming. There are ways that we can get rid of property taxes entirely in Wyoming without having to add an income tax, which, by the way, I am completely against. When it comes to property rights, honestly, this is my opinion, and we're dealing with this right now in Laramie County. You know, we have these property rights, and they're supposed to give us permission for property rights. But guess what? We have to get permission for anything on our property, right? So if you want to dig a hole, you got to get permission. If you want to sell eggs, you got to get permission. If you want to bake bread, and the list goes, I mean, no matter what you do on your property, you've got to you're technically, by the books, supposed to get permission for that. So when it comes to property rights, before I get into the next issue, which is gun rights, we have sort of this facade of property rights. Well, Joseph, I've been told, by the way, Joseph, we won't enforce what's on the books, for the property rights. And we're changing, we're going to change everybody's zoning so we have a little better control, things like this. You know what? If you're not trying to build a nuclear power plant on your property, or you're not being a bad neighbor, right? Because we've all seen bad neighbors. You got bad neighbors. Then you know what? The government, the local government, the state government should stay away from you. They just leave you alone. You do whatever you want on your property. As long as you're not a nuisance, you're not destroying the environment, and like I said, not building a nuclear power plant, then you don't need the government on your property for any reason. And so that's how I view property rights and property taxes. The next question actually came from Brian, and he wants to know about gun rights. So Wyoming recently passed a law about gun-free zones, right? We can now concealed carry in state buildings and potentially at schools. We all know that schools are handling that different across the state. Some schools have decided to just go with the legislation and say, hey, you know what, we're going to do anything else. People can carry. Other schools have put together training programs and stuff like that. I want to unpack Second Amendment rights real quick for you guys, though. And that is this. A free society, we accept the benefits and the downsides of our freedoms and our rights, right? So for me, gun rights are black and white. The Second Amendment says it will not be infringed. I think we need to roll gun rights all the way back to the Second Amendment in Wyoming and just leave it with that. A free society must accept the risks and the benefits of those freedoms. That's how we need to look at it. I think we need to go even further on removing regulations in Wyoming on gun rights and just leave them for what they are. And let's just be real. Real freedom should not have to ask for permission, right? So I think April will appreciate that because I know that she appreciates her gun rights. And you know what? We don't have to ask for permission for that, and we shouldn't have to. So for me, I'm all about allowing people to exercise their Second Amendment rights anywhere, anytime in the state of Wyoming for any reason. End of story. Because that's what our Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States says. So let's keep it simple. Let's roll it back to the Second Amendment. Leave it at that. Let's accept the risks and the benefits of that issue. The other thing is that Brian was asking a little bit about our wonderful neighbors to the south in Colorado, where they're making guns stricter and stricter and stricter, even in California. I mean, you have to fill out paperwork and get a background check to buy ammo in the state of California. So these places are not Second Amendment friendly. I think we've got to keep fighting for the second. I wish we didn't have to keep fighting for some of these issues, you guys, but we do. We have to keep fighting for these issues, even though our country's constitution says that that's our right. So for me, let's roll it back to the Constitution of the United States. Let's leave it at that. Let's accept that. What changes would I suggest, if any, to the gun community, Brian asked? Quite frankly, again, it's just out roll back. Let's roll back. Let's have our rights. Let's leave it at that. Black and white. Let's stop making things complicated beyond what anyone can reason with. Okay, so that's how I feel about it. So my next question, you guys, that I'm going to answer is kind of a fun one. And this one comes from my son. And he said, Dad, what if you're governor and a cop pulls you over and he's going to give you a speeding ticket? Would he give you a ticket? Would he not? Would he see you're the governor and not give you a ticket, just give you a warning? And I told him, I said, well, that's a great question. We have this thing, because I was a firefighter for 20 years, where you have professional courtesy, right? Where, the highway patrol pulls me over. Oh, Joseph, you're a firefighter on the mountain. Okay, I'll let you go, whatever, things like that. But for me, you must live by example. And I told my son this. I would not want that law enforcement officer to not give me a ticket for speeding, no matter who I am. I am not above the law. Please give me that ticket. Unless, of course, you were going to give me a warning. That's fine. Give me a warning. That's great. But my point to my son was that you are never above the law, whether you're governor or you're just a regular person living your life. We're not above the law. And so we got to live by example. So for me as a governor, in humility, I would want to live by example. And if I get pulled over for speeding or something, or right now, actually, I need to put the new plates on my car, I would say, yeah, go ahead and give me that ticket because I've earned it. So that was my son's question. Great, fun question from him. Michelle asked me, why am I running for governor? I want to tell you all, first of all, go to my website, go to the Meet Joseph page. There is a great 1-hour interview there with Joey from Just Blame Joey, where I tell you all about who I am and why I'm running for governor. For me, I'm fired up because we just need, this is what I believe we need as a culture, whether it's politically or here in Wyoming or nationally, we need regular people to run for office who have a vision, who bring solutions to the table, who will cut through the noise of, by the way, I call it the belly of the beast, because whether you're on the right, on the left, in the center, and you get involved in this, it's a beast, you guys. It's ugly. There's ugly on both sides. And it's because we don't have a lot of regular people just doing regular stuff in office. And so for me, I'm inspired. I came to Wyoming because I wanted my family to live in the land of the free and the home of the brave. And I see a lot of that being taken away from us very, very regularly. And it feels an awful lot like Colorado, California, these other places. You know what? Don't Californicate my Wyoming. And so I'm inspired to run for those reasons. I've spent my entire life in leadership in some way. And I believe that I can be the strong leader that will bring people to the table and guide people towards actual solutions instead of legislative band-aids, which is what we continue to get year after year after year, as more layers of bureaucracy in a different way because someone else is in office. What we're not getting is less layers of bureaucracy so that we can enjoy our freedom. So, Michelle, hopefully that answers some of your question. And then again, go listen to that interview. I think it'd be really insightful for all of you to listen to that. So let me get into the hot topic real quick. I'm going to take a quick break from questions. Begin the hot topic, the feud between Mark Gordon and Chuck Gray over green energy and wind farms. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier in the show, and I want to just be really, really clear. We all know that green energy, so we're talking primarily about solar and wind energy, we know that it's a lie. This is not green energy. The cost to facilitate, to maintain, to dispose of these supposed green energies is astronomical. And it never makes up for the energy that it produces. It's one of the biggest lies of our modern age, I believe. And we got to buy into this fact that, well, we got to go green. We got to go green. You know what? 50 years ago, we knew how to be more green. You know what? We washed our dishes. We didn't use a dishwasher. We hung our clothes out on a line. We didn't use dryers and washers. There's a ton of things we could talk about. You know what? Everything we used, we recycled it at home. We reused it. The containers, things like that, whatever. We created reusable things. You go to the grocery store today, and you push your cart out of the grocery store, you're going to come out with 50 pounds of plastic, right? It didn't used to be like that. So if we want to be green, let's start at home. Let's start with making some better habits at home. Use reusable items. Get reusable items. Stuff like that. But green energy, I would, by the way, and I'm going to reiterate, I would have sided with Chuck Gray in the case of the wind farms. There's just not enough data, not enough research, and not enough wherewithal to continue to subsidize these things, to send energy out of state, so that other states can meet their green goals. And meanwhile, Wyoming is paying the price. So we're not going to do that in a Joseph governorship. We're just not going to do it. We're going to find other ways to have good energy, clean energy, because I am a conservationist. I want to talk about that for a minute. I'm not an environmentalist. I'm a conservationalist. I love being outside in the Grand Teton National Park, Yellowstone, Medicine Bow National Forest. I love, going out and being able to enjoy Devil's Tower and some of the other great sites here in our great state. So be conservationalist while reaching our modern goals with energy, conservation, things like that. But no, I'm a hard no. Until we can come up with a green energy that actually makes sense, we're not gonna build more wind farms. That's not the answer. All right, next question. Kevin has been talking to me a lot the last couple of weeks about budget and Doge at the state and local levels across Wyoming. And I will tell you this, we're blessed here in Wyoming. I want to remind everyone of that our tax rates are pretty low as compared to the rest of the nation. We're still in the bottom 3 or 4 in regards to our tax rates. We also have a smaller budget than most states do. So we have less problems, right? More money, more problems, right? We've all heard that before. So when we talk about doging the state, but also requiring local governments to do that, we absolutely have to do that. We have to do that in a real intangible way. You know what we do right now is they say, oh, wow, we cut all this spending over here. And what's happening is they're just moving that money somewhere else and they're spending it in a different way. So what we need to do is we need to audit the books line by line. And I know the current legislature, Freedom Caucus, everybody, they're currently talking about this issue. They're currently talking about how can we go line by line and cut the waste. And I will say this, I am not going to say there's not waste in Wyoming, but we are, when you compare to the federal government or states like California, Colorado, our waste is minuscule as it is compared to other states. So we're doing a decent job in Wyoming, but we can improve on that, and we will. So, Kevin, I appreciate our conversations over the last couple of weeks, and let's continue that conversation about doging and about really looking at our budget and making sure that every dime we're spending benefits people in Wyoming. In fact, I have kind of a personal saying, don't put it on my desk if it doesn't do anything for the people of Wyoming. If all it's doing is serving the 165 pages of lobbyists that we now have in the state of Wyoming, which, by the way, we've created because everything is permission-based. If I want to do something with my business, I got to go get permission from the legislature. We need to unwind that. So if it doesn't serve the people and it's only serving the lobby, we need to look at that. And that's part of this budget and cutting out the waste and the wasteful spending and things like that. And there are a lot of things that most of us don't understand, spending that is necessary. But we have to be responsible with people's tax dollars. Hey, and again, let's get rid of property taxes. Let's never have income tax, of course. Let's keep working on those things. Let's look at other ways to create state revenue. So I've been talking to a friend of mine, Brandy. Brandy doesn't even know I'm going to be mentioning her today, but I'm going to do it anyway. But we've been talking a little bit about education. So, Joseph, what do you think about education and government funding and things like that? Whenever you accept funds of any kind, funds, and by the way, your money, so tax dollars, funds, code word, your money, that you have given to the government because they say you have to, there's always a string attached. I'm blessed. I'm just going to sit here before you. I'm a homeschool dad, and we have used the Wyoming Tech Trap Academy for the last couple of years for our kids, and we've really enjoyed that. We get a couple of bucks each year for our kids' activities, curriculum, and things like that. I know we've passed some recent legislation, the Steamboat legislation, where you get $7,000 for each of your kids to spend that on their education, things like that. I think we have to be careful with this, and here's why. What has government funding done to higher education? It's raised the cost. If you look at a graph where government started giving out government loans for education. You look at higher education, and higher education is kind of going like this. The minute government loans became available, the cost for higher education went this direction, and it continues to go that direction. So how much funding do we really want? Because here's what's going to happen. We're going to try to help all these families, private schools, $7,000 a year. Mark my words. That private school is going to cost $10,000 in 2 years. Okay, so it's great. We've tried to help them. Now they're priced out again. But now you've also priced out the people who can actually afford private school. So I think you've got to really be careful when it comes to education and government funding. I will tell you one really brief thing before I get to the next issue. I got another fun question from my kids. But before I get into that, I will tell you one thing about education that we need to do, and I'm going to make it really simple. We need to tear education back to the studs because we've been legislating it for decades. We've been using our kids as political pawns for decades without results. In fact, cost is going this way, results are going this way, right? So we need to rip education back to the studs. I want to bring the leaders of our legislature, the leaders of our education together into a room, and we're going to duke it out with a video in the middle so that Wyoming can see what we're duking out when it comes to education. We're going to pull it back to the studs. We're going to keep the things we know work, reading, writing, arithmetic, and interest-based learning, and we're going to cut everything else out. Maybe we only have first or 10th grade, and then people are career ready when they're 16, 17 years old. I got a lot of ideas on education. We got to pull it back to the studs, stop using our kids as political pawns, and stop using it. Oh, we need just throw more money at it. That's not the answer. We need to overhaul education in a real, true, meaningful way. And that means doing a hard thing, tearing it to the studs, like I said. Notice I didn't say push the whole building over. Tear it back to the studs. Get back to reading, writing, and arithmetic, first or 10th grade, so that when people are in 10th grade, they're ready to go to work. And if they want to be a professional or something, they go to college for that. And hopefully the college will stop wasting our kids' times too on courses that they don't need if they want to be a doctor or they want to be a lawyer. You know, why do they need to know some obscure thing from some other place in the planet, right? Let's focus on what people want to do. These kids want to do what their interest is. So I'm going to get off the education bandwagon because I could talk about that alone for an hour. Another fun question from my kids. Dad, can you lower the cost of living if you're governor? Well, I told them the short answer is no. The long answer is kind of yes. What can we do to lower the cost of living? I start with energy. If you can lower the cost of energy, the cost of living goes down across the board, right? So making sure that we're regulating our energy in the correct way, that we're producing more than enough energy. Because guess what? When you have a surplus of something, what happens to the cost? The cost goes down when you have a surplus. So let's get energy costs. Let's drive them down, 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 down. Let's get back to where you're paying, $100 a month for your electricity or $75 a month for your electricity, because we have so much of it that we're going to go ahead and we're going to lower the cost. That will lower the cost of your food. That'll lower the cost of the rest of your utilities. That'll lower the cost of driving your car from your house to your church. That's how you start lowering the cost of things. That for me, that's number one. We can also look at taxes and stuff like that, you guys, as well, to see what can we do with taxes that will go ahead and help lower the cost of living. You know, I think it's a great question for my kids, because my kids, they see the increase in the cost of living and how that affects our lives. I mean, yes, I have a small business, but I'm a dad, I'm a father, I'm a homeschool dad, I'm a Christian. We just try to live our lives. You know, I work hard. You notice I've got a little sun on my face today. I've been out all day in the yard working on trees and stuff. Good time, of course, but hard work. And so how can that hard work be rewarded? How about you don't pay property taxes anymore? How about we lower the cost of energy so that all your cost of living goes down? So for my kids, hopefully that answers your questions. My kids, Frank wanted to know a little bit about life and abortion. You know, for me, abortion, you're not going to hear me talk about abortion a lot on my campaign trail. And instead, what you're going to hear me talk about is the root causes. And that's going to go across the board for every issue. I'm not going to talk a lot about abortion because here's where I stand. It's really easy. Life begins at conception. Therefore, abortion is not something that we can facilitate here in Wyoming, and we shouldn't facilitate it anywhere in the world. It's a great evil of our time, in my opinion. But with that being said, let's talk about the root cause. What if we, as conservatives, put the same amount of energy into teaching our kids the value of life? The number one issue we have with abortion, it's not abortion itself. It's a fact that we've raised several generations that don't value life. There is no value to life. If we could start bringing values back to education and teach kids that life matters and that life starts at conception, maybe we could win more of that abortion battle. What if we spent the same amount of energy helping these young men and women with their fears instead of the abortion issue? What do I mean by that? They're afraid they can't take care of the child. They don't know what to do with the child. They're a child themselves, and now they're having a child. What if we spent the same amount of energy on supporting them and loving them and helping them get through that tough experience? What if we did that? And we put the same amount of energy that we put into abortion into these things, these underlying causes. Maybe it's poverty. What if we put the same amount of energy into that? Maybe we would win a lot more on the abortion issue. So that's where I stand on that. Again, very brief for the sake of time here. I can't believe it. Okay, we're already about 30 minutes in to this, so I want to make sure I get to all the questions that I've got. So Eric asked me a really, really good question. Actually, Eric, a good friend of mine from the Talk Shop in Laramie. If you guys have not heard his show, he does a great show out of Laramie called the Talk Shop. And what I love about him, and he's all about everybody. He's not right, he's not left, he lets everybody have a voice. I really appreciate that about Eric. And he asked me, what will I do to maintain my availability and responsiveness to the citizens? I think it's a great question. I think it's a hard question. You got to remember, okay, so now I'm the governor. I'm sitting in the governor's seat, and now I have, a couple of 100,000 people that want to talk to me. Okay, you have to find a way to maintain and manage that communication. I think one of the best things that I could do as governor, Eric, to answer your question, is be available in a sense that I do a lot of outreach. So what do I mean by that? Maybe once a week, maybe twice a week, I get on live just like I'm doing right now as governor of Wyoming, and I tell Wyoming, hey guys, this is what's up in your government. This is what's on my desk. This is what's going on in the legislature. What if you had a governor who communicates well to the people? That makes me available to them because they can ask me questions. You guys can ask questions right now on live. Hey, if I'm governor and maybe once a week, twice a week, I do this. And you guys can ask questions and I will do my best to answer them and be available to the people in a way that we've not ever seen from politicians or from people in office. I watched a lot of the legislative session this last time around. I don't know if many of you did, but you can't comment on the legislative YouTube channel. You can't interact. You can't ask questions. You can't engage. Stuff like that will change if Joseph is elected governor because communication is key. A lot of times people just don't understand what's going on and someone needs to tell them. Well, I will be that governor that will be available to tell you guys. I'll also be that governor, and I'll use this other example. A couple months ago, some folks were having a die-in in the Capitol. They were protesting the gun-free zones and things like that and the removal of those. The kind of governor that I want to be in my heart is, even though I'll never agree with those people, I will walk down to that floor, I'll sit on those stairs in the Capitol, and I'll say, I want to hear you. I want to listen to what you have to say. Now, I can't do that every day. I can't set that precedence that, hey, you go and protest at the Capitol, I'm going to walk in there and talk to you. But I sure as well try to be available to the people. So, Eric, hopefully that answers your question. The next question, I've got a couple more hot topics to talk about. The next question comes from Corey. I think Corey's had some personal experience with this, but also just a challenge with this. And that is, Joseph, what do you do about law enforcement overreach and or targeting and things like that? And Corey, I really appreciate that question. And I have law enforcement friends here in Wyoming. They are my friends. And I've talked to them about a lot of law enforcement issues as I'm running for governor to really understand where they're coming from and what's going on with them. And I'm going to start with this. I have a tremendous respect and adoration, really, for our law enforcement professionals, the people that make that sacrifice to leave their family every single day. They walk out their front door and there's a chance they won't come home. I think we got to live a day in their shoes before we can judge them too hard. And yeah, are there bad cops out there? Yeah, there are. Are there cops that had egos? Yes, absolutely. Are there cops from time to time that do the wrong thing? Absolutely. Hey, you know what? You elect me as governor. I'll do my best, but I'm not always going to do the right thing. I'm going to try, but I'm human too. I think we got to give our law enforcement professionals, Corey, a lot of grace. And I think if you have an issue, it's good to talk to them about it. It's good to elect good officials to do that. By the way, a good friend of mine, Darren, he's running for sheriff in Albany County. Look him up. He's a guy that will bring law and order back to Albany County, and it will be fair and just and right. Not like it is right now. I digress a little bit, but I want to give a shout out to my community and folks in my community across the state. So when there's a true overreach or you're being targeted by law enforcement, I think you need to get help with that. I think if that's going on, you need to be vocal about that. And whether that's getting our judicial system involved or filing a formal complaint and going in there and talking to people, it's amazing what you can do in a conversation. We've created a society, or we live in a society where we text, we hide behind these, and we behave in ways we wouldn't normally behave. So think about that. Go have a conversation. For me, by the way, that's the kind of governor that I will be. I've reached out to a lot of folks in this state already going, hey, let's sit down. Let's have a conversation face to face. Let's do this. Let's not text. Let's not email. Let's be real with each other. And I think you can solve a lot when it comes to issues with police and targeting and things like that by simply having a real conversation with the issue at hand. And you know what? If there's an officer that needs to be corrected or needs to be taken off the force, that needs to happen. I'm all for that. But I think we have to be really careful. We got to walk a day in these guys' shoes. Remember, these men and women, they serve us dealing with the worst of society every single day. Every day. And sometimes that may cross a line to a decent person, and that might happen. But let's give them the grace and the respect that they deserve. And if there's an issue, let's take care of it. Let's address it. All right, I've got a question here from Ian. How are we going to deal with the teacher shortage? I actually just got this on text, so I'm going to go ahead and take that. Got a few text message questions here, so I'm going to grab those. It's not a money problem in Wyoming. Our teachers are already some of the highest paid teachers in the United States. The issue is the environment and the culture that we've handed to our teachers, you guys. This goes back to my earlier comment about tearing education back to the studs, letting teachers teach, getting rid of all of the agenda. No, you know what? I don't want you to push my right agenda in school. I don't want you to push my left agenda in school. I don't want you to do anything in school. Let their parents teach them that stuff. Teach them reading, writing, and arithmetic. I think a lot of the frustration and burnout that we see in teachers in Wyoming, again, it's not a money thing. It's the fact that they've been handed decades of legislation and things that they're supposed to do or that they were required to do instead of just teach. They got to teach to a standardized test, and that's what they do. So how do we get rid of teacher shortage? Well, we got to stop the burnout. The way you stop the burnout is you remove the burden that we've created as a government, federally. By the way, federal government's working on that, right? Department of Education. They're getting taken care of. But that we go ahead and we remove the burden from the teachers so they can go ahead and teach and do what they're called to do and do it well. I think that's one of the biggest ways that we can address the teacher shortage thing. Ian, hopefully that answers your question. I've got another question here. Let's see. Let me pull up another question here. Another question about education. It's really, really a hot topic tonight. How would you help teachers' education cultivate a path towards freedom? Again, I think I just addressed that. That's another question I've got here. People texting me questions. We've got to give our teachers freedom. Right now, they don't. They got the same problem that we have with gun rights and property rights and healthcare and all this stuff. They don't have real freedom to teach. So let's give them back the freedom to teach. Reading, writing, and arithmetic. Let's get back to basics and interest-based learning. So hopefully that helps you guys answer. Let me check, make sure I don't have any more text message questions. I'll get to my next question. All right, so let's see. I've got some comments on my Facebook feed. Common Core standards. Yeah, again, people are still talking about, they want to talk about education here a little bit more. So, Common Core. Well, let's toss that out with the bathwater, right? 2 plus 2 does equal 4, even if you can make an argument that 2 plus 2 equals 5. That's not real life. So, I mean, I think we're working on, rolling back a lot of that garbage that's been in our schools, whether it's the DEI or the CRT, stuff like that. So, yeah. April, I see that you commented. The issue is with the Common Core and standards. Again, going back to the fact that we're just bleeding people out because we're burning them out because we've created this monster of a burden on them, just like we have on. I'll use April as an example since she's commenting a whole bunch on my posts right now. We have created such a burden for the common man, and it starts at the top. Starts at the governor of Wyoming. Well, it starts really at the president of the United States, right? And it trickles down eventually to the states, to the governor, to the secretary of state, to the treasurer, to the legislature. And we have created such a burden for the common man. And I'm sitting here before you guys saying, I'm a common man. I can relate to every single one of you that are watching this. If you have a family, if you've got kids, you're just trying to live life. And everywhere you go, you hit a wall, a government wall on something, or a regulation for this, or red tape for that, or no, you're not allowed to do this or that. We got to unwind that. And it's going to take a lot of hard work, but we can unwind it. So let's unwind it. We got to do it together as the people of Wyoming. It cannot be done without the people deciding we've had enough of this and making a voice loud enough and electing people who want to reflect that voice and get it done. And I'm that person. I want to get it done, and I will go in guns blazing to get this thing done. Pun intended. Well, no, I'm not going to shoot anybody, but we're going to get things done, right? And that's what we've got to do. Let me see. Okay, let me see if I've got any more questions here in the feed, and I'll go to my next hot topic. Okay, so hot topic, corner crossing. By the way, it sounds like this is going to go all the way up to the United States Supreme Court on corner crossing. We've said in Wyoming, hey, we got to allow it. That people cannot get to the land that belongs to them, to the state land or the public land or things like that, because we have created this property issue, not just in Wyoming, but across the nation, where we've allowed public property to be completely blocked off by private property without saying, hey, you've got to allow for a way, whether it's a road or a thoroughfare or a corner crossing, for people to get to public property if you own all this land. So it's an issue. It'd be interesting to see. Above my pay grade, since it's going to the Supreme Court of the United States. But I think it's an interesting topic. If public land is not accessible to the public, which, by the way, is a topic for another day, because we could talk about the state taking over all the federal lands. That is an interesting topic that we could talk about. I'm not going to do that today, just in the interest of time, because we're already 40 minutes into this. So we got to be able to access that land, you guys. So we've got to figure out a way that works for landowners. And we love our landowners. We love our cattlemen. We love our ranches. We probably don't love the Microsofts so much and some of those other things that are coming to our state as much. They do bring, hopefully, they bring a lot of revenue to the state and good jobs and things like that. But we want to keep Wyoming, which means that we got to be able to access that land. So corner crossing, that's an interesting topic. I'm going to check my texts real quick here. I think I have some more here. Some states are implementing AI in the classroom as governor. Would you oppose it? Wow. AI is something, I'm kind of, for some of you that know, I own a business. I've owned a business for 22 years. It's a web development and marketing business, in addition to my firefighting experience and stuff like that. But obviously, I'm in the throes of technology right now when it comes to AI. It is such a powerful tool. It is growing faster than most of us can even comprehend. And whether you're talking about, does the future look like a robot maybe as a teacher now? And AI is now in the classroom, and The teacher is an AI. Whoa, wouldn't that be wild? But that could be where we're headed, you guys. I mean, think about it. When it comes to AI in the classroom, I think there's a couple of things we have to do. Don't cheat, right? I have somebody that confessed to me, oh, yeah, my brother, he just finished his 4-year degree and he didn't do any work the entire 4 years. He just had AI do all of his university work for him or all his college work for him. He did no work. He graduated with a degree and didn't learn anything. So, AI in the classroom, I think we have to use it. Scott actually asked me that question. Scott, we have to think about a creative, productive way to bring AI to the classroom. And here is my number one reason why I say that, Scott. It's the way we're going to do things in the future. I mean, it is so much of what we do. It's ingrained to our everyday life. I mean, I think about even just 2 years ago, me and my company, we used AI for nothing. And how we use it all day, every day in our workplace, in our business. And that doesn't just apply to me in the creative industry, you guys. This applies to builders. This applies to handyman. This applies to physical jobs as well as professional jobs, blue collar, white collar jobs. Our kids have got to be equipped to know how to use this technology because so many of our jobs and our future and our workplace is going to require us to use AI. So for us to keep that away from our kids, Scott, I think that might be a mistake. But I also know it is so early on, and yet technology is moving right faster than any of us can keep up. We do need to think about how do we implement this technology into the classroom so that our kids can learn it and can understand it. We don't want, AI taking tests for our kids. For me, by the way, Scott, this brings up another topic for me. I really don't want to see cell phones in the classroom. I just don't. I think cell phones ought to be put in the locker or whatever so kids can focus on education. For hundreds of years, we've had education without cell phones. Our kids can survive without their cell phones in the classroom. I know many districts in Wyoming have eliminated cell phones in the classroom. I think that's great. It's off, it's on silent, it's under the desk, whatever, and it's not being used during class. I think that's so important. So, Scott, I think you unpacked something really there, and I actually want to get into another topic. Let me double check, see if I have any more great text messages coming in here, and let me check my messages on my live stream here, you guys, real quick, just to see if I've got any other questions here. Oh, here we go. We got another question. What measures will you take as governor to help bring the cost of food, specifically beef and the beef cattle industry, down in light of the USDA's reporting that beef will continue to increase by 6.3% through the summer months? That's a great question, April, and I think my answer to that is really simple, and it kind of goes back to a lot of what I've already said, which is in order for us to drive the cost of goods down, hey, you know what? We need to turn our cattlemen loose. I mean, again, and I'm pun intended, we've hogtied these guys. We've hogtied our food producers. Again, with bureaucracy. Mountains and mountains and mountains of bureaucracy. And of course, right now, we're dealing with tariffs too, which is affecting our ability to go ahead and keep the cost of beef and things like that down. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I like to buy like half a cow or a whole cow at a time. And then I don't worry about having to buy beef for another year. But yeah, that's a real great question. Again, it goes back to the root cause of what I'm talking about. Let's get energy down. Let's get bureaucracy down. Let's let cattlemen and cattlewomen be cattlemen and cattlewomen. Let's not bureaucratically, just cost them into oblivion, because that's what we're doing. I mean, we're doing that to business, whether it's small business, not so much here in Wyoming. But the federal government certainly does. The federal government is a massive burden on our beef producers, the USDA and things like that. And yeah, we need to have safe food. Absolutely. Absolutely. But again, we need to unwind bureaucracy. We need to support these folks. We need to let them produce food and leave them alone. And trust them. Yeah, this is a big problem we have with government. Government doesn't trust you and me to do anything without their permission and their oversight and their input. A free society, we're going to take, again, I'm going to go back, we're going to take the good with the bad when it comes to free society if we really want to have true freedom. And that's what my whole campaign is about, is pushing for true freedom, which means that we don't need permission to do stuff. That we get to be individuals and we get to enjoy freedom. Oh, you know what? Let me see. I've got someone asking me another question. It looks like I missed it. So let me hop over here. I'm going to hop over here on my Facebook real quick because it looks like I may have potentially missed a question. So let me get over here real quick. And April, I am trying to see where you're commenting, so bear with me because you said that you had another question. By the way, April, thank you so much for your interaction today. I really appreciate your questions and your interaction. This is great. So let me pull up this. Oh, you know what? I think Facebook thinks that you're trying to scam me or something here, April, because I'm not seeing question 3. But give me just a second here. I am going to try. It's not letting me see all of your comments because Facebook has decided what's important. By the way, on that note, I've been summarily shadow banned on Facebook, a whole bunch, and it's been really frustrating. It's been really, really super annoying. But yeah, April, all your questions are not showing, and Facebook is hiding them from me. So let me see if I can somehow get that to show, because I am not getting that option right now. So stand by just a second. If anybody else also have any questions, feel free to text me. You have my number. My number's on my website. You guys can text me questions. Joseph4wy.com. Joseph4wy.com. You can literally find my phone number right there, and you can text me. So text me. Let me know if you have any questions. Yeah, April. I'm trying my darndest to see your comment right now, and give me just a second because it's being a beast. If you want to repost your question, please do. Question number 3, and I will absolutely take a look at it. Facebook's not even notifying me that you're commenting on my stuff. Right? How nice is that, huh? Yeah, they're it's a real pain, but you know what? I'm still fighting the fight on Facebook every single day. I'm just telling them, hey, you know what? I want to be able to interact with people in Wyoming, and you need to let me do that. So, yeah, it is hiding your comments, April. Unfortunately, I can't see it if you want to repost it. Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah, do that. Text it over to me. That would be great. And that way I can see that. That way you're not being silenced by Facebook. That wonderful algorithm that we love so much, right? I'm going to try to answer that last question that I'm being asked. I'm going to wrap it up for the evening. I've really enjoyed talking to you all this evening, Wyoming. It's been a lot of fun. I know I've answered a lot of questions. A lot of these go a lot deeper, obviously, than a quick, 45-minute to an hour ask me anything kind of a session. But if anything sparked your interest while I was speaking, please feel free to reach out to me. Call me, text me, email me, set up a Zoom meeting or set up an in-person meeting with me, and I will meet with you. I'm happy to do that. And if you've liked what you've heard today and you want to share it, please go to Joseph4wy.com. Engage with me there. You can obviously reach out to me on all of my social channels, and I'm happy to do that. Let me see. Okay, I have got that last question here. What do you plan to do as governor to help local communities stuck implementing the Biden era permanent rules in a number of federal departments, things like that, things like the lead copper rules, which requires all communities to change any water lines, if they can't confirm they never had lead, things like that. A lot of Biden era rules, but also even, I think, just rules in general, April. And these are obviously, this is a great question. We know that lead is extremely bad for our health. But, for me, it's kind of like the government requiring me to pay taxes, right? Now you got the government requiring a community to get something done when they don't have the money for it. So I think one of the things that I want our people in Wyoming to be incredibly healthy. And that would include something like getting lead out of pipes and things like that. I think that would be important. But I think we got to do something to support them. We can't just say, hey, you got to foot this bill for this, multi-million-dollar project in your city or your county or your state or whatever. And we're not going to help you. You just got to figure out a way to get the money. You know what? That's where revenue in this state should go back and benefit the people. And hey, you know what, Wheatland? If you've got lead pipes and you need help getting that replaced, you're sure as heck the state is going to stand by you and help you get that done. And better yet, I will call the federal government and say, hey, you have mandated this. You need to pay for it. You need to help pay for it. You don't just mandate our lives and then not give us an answer and help pay for it. That goes back to property taxes and everything. So I would want to see a couple of things happen. We unroll the unreasonable, right? That's the first part of it is ask ourselves, is this a reasonable, whether it's Biden administration or Trump administration or a future administration, is this reasonable for the good of our people here in Wyoming? And if the answer is yes, we need to come up with a way to actually do it. We're so great at coming up with ideas. We're so great at passing legislation. We're so great at making rules for everybody else. We're super not great at actually making a plan and executing it. We're super not great at putting a burden on people and not giving them the tools they need to succeed. So I think we got to start by unwinding a lot of that. And then what we'll do is we'll look back. Oh, well, yeah, lead in pipes is bad for people. So let's figure out a way to do this without breaking Wheatland's budget. Federal government, you mandated that. That's a good mandate. Okay, cool. How are you going to pay for it? How are you going to help us pay for it? How can the state step in with state revenue and help pay for it? You know what? Just because it's the state's, it's technically yours and mine. Okay? So if you live in a county or a city or a town across the state of Wyoming and they're struggling with something because they don't have the budget for something that's legit, that bridge needs to be replaced, those lead pipes need to be replaced, we better be stepping up and getting it done. Not expect somehow for these local municipalities to somehow survive and just figure it out and get it done. We better be helping them, which we're not doing. By the way, we're not doing a lot of that right now. Everything's separated. Everything's mine and yours. No. It belongs to the people. And if the people in Wheatland need pipes replaced, then we better get it done. If we need a bridge in Hot Springs, we're going to get it done. It's just we got this idea that we've created a bureaucracy and we can't get anything done. And so with that, you guys, we're about 8 minutes from the top of the hour. I appreciate you all watching. I'm going to turn my music up here for just a little bit here. Again, thank you for watching. Share this video if it meant something to you. Share it on your Facebook group. Share it on your Instagram, your YouTube, wherever you like to play on social media. Share it, please. Share it with your friends in Wyoming. Have them learn and get to know me. I'd appreciate that. They can meet me on my website. Love that. Again, Joseph4wy.com. Joseph4wy.com. I've super enjoyed this third Ask Me Anything. You guys, look at my calendar on my website. I think I've got 3 or 4 more of these at least scheduled. Once a month, I will do these. And guys, I'm not afraid to answer anything. Ask me what I ate for breakfast if you want to. Ask me hard questions. Ask me questions that I have to go, you know what? I don't have an answer for you, but I will get back to you. Ask me the hard questions. Ask me the things that you're scared to ask. Because I really want to be the people's governor. And that's why I'm running for governor of the great state of Wyoming. Thank you again so much for everyone who interacted, for those that commented, for those that texted me. I think I had 8 or 10 texts during the show. That was awesome. I love that. Keep it coming. And I look forward to hearing from you soon, Wyoming. And until next time, you guys be safe. Enjoy the great freedoms that we do have. We are so blessed. Count your blessings, you guys. I have friends around the world. And we are still the envy of the world. Whether they're in Europe or Asia or Africa, we are the envy of the world. We have a lot to be thankful for. So I want to leave you guys with that. Wake up and be thankful because we are blessed. Have a great night, Wyoming. Thank you again for watching.